we are back to talk about more GCP content today. Or actually not GCP today.
Google
Big
Analytics.
topic, Google Analytics. Before that, Alex, Thomas, Ricardo.
Hi, everybody.
Hello.
Thomas, big news.
Was there something last week's? Yeah. We are already quite late with that, to be honest. We put out a blog post, but Universal Analytics is ending at the middle of next year for free users. I think 1st of October.
First, I have it here. So first July 2023 for all free users, and 1st of October 2023 for all paid users. So for 360.
Exactly. And
quite quickly, a person would realize why it's so important, even though it's October 2023. Because?
Yeah. Still, a lot of users are using Universal Analytics, and it's also quite tough to change to the new version of Google Analytics, which is Google Analytics 4. So everyone who's doing web analytics knows about Universal Analytics. They probably also know about Google Analytics 4, but both versions are quite different to each other. Not only in the way they track basically sessions and behavior on websites, but also the way they show it in the front end, like in the analytical dashboard, is completely different. So of course, a lot of teams who worked already since years with Universal Analytics didn't like to make the step at the very beginning to go to Google Analytics 4, which I personally can totally understand, because it changes complete procedures, ways to analyze data, and also ways to how people basically, or how whole departments were basically consuming data and also working with web analytics data. So some of the companies, they implemented GA4 as a side project. They still continue to use Google Universal Analytics. Some of them didn't even do that. And Google said since at least 1.5, 2 years, I would say, Alex.
I think so, yeah.
There will be a point when Universal Analytics is gone and will be basically end of life cycle. And this was communicated 2-3 weeks ago, I would say, right?
So
from now on.
So the 14th March was the announcement.
Yeah.
Yes, so maybe quick things about the ending. So on the 1st of July or 1st of October, that means then all of your Universal Analytics properties don't get any data anymore. I think, or at least I think, Google not say it clearly, I think, if you have still access to your data from Universal Analytics, not absolutely sure. But at least there are no new data. And then you have to use Google Analytics 4. Yes, so there are completely different kinds of properties, completely different kind of tracking, completely different kind of website and of the front end of Google Analytics 4. So
I mean, the front end is kind of the same, right?
Kind of the same.
Generally.
So for example, navigation, you have still acquisition, so how the user came to your website, then engagement, is it called, or something like that. So how the users are behaving on your website.
Forehand behavior, right?
Exactly. And then conversions. So then the end of the journey, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Plus some tech details and some customer or user details. But yeah. So but
what
then
does it
also
mean?
and you have then also a different kind of the data behind in GA4 or GA4. So I think that's maybe the most important one, at least for all of the developers or tracking experts for GA4 and Universal Analytics. So in Universal Analytics, the main metric, the main KPI was a page view. And then for every page view, you can then have some different kind of events. And in GA4, the big difference is that everything is an event. So, for example, on one report in GA4, you have all of the events. There's a page view, but there's also newsletter submit, but there's also a purchase. There's also, I don't know, some header link clicks, some affiliate link clicks, whatever. All of that is just an event. So GA4 don't really differentiate between, but for sure some of the general available reports and charts are based on page views in terms of how many users are visited one page, every page, and so on. So for sure, that's also for the basic tracking, the page view is still inside, and is also for most of the people the most important feature.
I think we have to a little bit explain where the whole change was coming from. So there were some I think some years ago they implemented. I think it's already now 4 years ago at least, if not 5. And they had a new property which was called web and app property. And web and app property was a little bit like merging the web view and the app view from the mobile phone, like from like Play Store or App Store apps at the end. Because the thing is, you don't have page views in an app, right? You have basically events or you have sessions, but you don't have this typical page view.
At least it's not so clear as a normal website.
Yeah.
What is a page view?
And beforehand, you had basically 2 properties in Google Analytics. You had basically the property for your website, and you had a property for your application, like for your app. And it was quite hard to see what is the real engagement, and is the same are the same people coming via the phone application or the website. And then Google tried to basically merge that into web app property, and this was after a while transformed to GA4. So GA4 is now running since 2 years at least. The whole difference now after Google basically announced the end of Universal Analytics is that people now need to, or companies now need to start track their stuff with GA4 or go to a complete different web tracking service. We don't want to start today with data privacy or things like that. I think that's worth another video. But of course, also with the whole change, maybe a lot of companies think about are we continuing to use Google? Because it gets trickier and trickier to track data in the right way of like privacy. And are we going to GA4 or not? What definitely will happen is that you need to use GA4 from now on, and you cannot use Universal Analytics anymore. And I think it's a starting point where companies realize now we have to do something, and now we have to change something. Yeah? And even if they already tracked their data in a parallel stream with GA4, I think there was never a pressure to move away from Universal Analytics as long as this was working. And now, from now on, it's, let's say, 1 year to go. And it's plenty of time, I would say. It's 12 months. And now the transition process need to start. For bigger companies, they are normally 360 customers anyway, due to limits and so on. So they have 5 months more. No, 3 months more. It's July. Yeah. So I don't know if 3 months is that big difference then. Probably not.
Yeah. But maybe it's more for Google. Easier to do an easier or step-by-step shift.
Let's say I can imagine that people who are working with Google Analytics quite often might be watching this video. How would you recommend them to arrange this transition period? I mean, this is like, okay, yes, now the decision is taken for you that you cannot use Universal Analytics anymore in a bit more than 12 months. You decided to go for GA4.
Yeah.
What happens next?
So there is this parallel tracking. So that's the best approach, I think. So it is quite easy to establish a basic tracking for GA4, even also for Universal Analytics, but it's a different one. It's the best. You have one website and you have one tracking pixel for Universal Analytics, what you can still use till the dates we set, and also already implement one tracking pixel for your GA4 data. The good thing is then, for example, when you have collected some data for 1 month or whatever, then you can also compare the data, and you can also see, okay, that data I see in Universal at that place, and in GA4 I have to go to that place, and there I can also see the data. Because the most big thing, or the most questions we get when we show the new GA4 properties is always, okay, in Universal I saw that and that data, where I can see it in GA4. And then we always say, I would say nearly everything is also possible in GA4. Some of that is not shown by default, but for some of them you have to do some more customized reports and so on. So for example, GA4 is really pushing that customization in a lot of ways. So you can create custom reports, so also create some kind of data studio reports. Or you can also change the already available reports and share it with other people. So that's also possible. So for example, if you don't have an app, for example, for your tracking, then you can take off all of your app default reports and then maybe adjust it with some more web analytics. So so that's maybe the best approach to do the shift.
What happens with the migration? It's also creating a new property, correct? Or does it stay with the same property when you migrate?
No, you have to create a new.
Because then it's also the parallel stream, right? At the end, just settings try to get
exactly. So exactly. So when you are migrating or copying, I don't know what I think migrating is the correct word. Exactly. So it creates a new GA4 property, and it looks at all of your Universal settings and try to adjust or try to also push everything which is possible also to a GA4 property. So that's
but you cannot stay with your historical data, correct?
Yes.
And this is
due to all of the different data structure, it is not possible, or Google don't want to. I don't know.
I think that a lot of companies didn't do the transition because they thought there will be somewhen a migration which is also migrating the data.
Maybe yes.
At least I heard from a lot of companies exactly that. Yeah, we don't do that right now because it's still like beta phase or starting phase. We wait till the point where we can also basically get all of our historical data shipped to the new property. At the moment, it looks like that's not that easy, and it's not possible, right? And we all don't know what's happening with Universal Analytics, what's happening with the data. It could be that the properties are there forever, but you cannot basically push new information inside, like new data. It can be that they shut the service down. Would wonder me a little bit because you would lose your historical data, but we don't know yet. So it's at the end we now have the answer when the service is basically ending, and we can plan to the future. And this is what a lot of companies are doing at the moment. So it's good for us as an agency, obviously, but it's bad for the customer because like everyone is running to someone who can now like migrate their stuff, or because if they don't have the people inside the company themselves who can do that, they obviously need help, and there are only a limited number of agencies on the market. And we see already now that the questions for like migrating stuff or creating GA4 tracking concepts, it's increasing quite quickly. On top of that, we also have client-side versus server-side tracking, which is also a big issue to a lot of companies. Complete different story, first of all, we have to say. When we then put the topic privacy on top of that, then we have a super complex thing to talk about, because we have two versions of Google Analytics. We have two types of implementation, client-side, server-side, and we have the problem or the complexity that you need to do it in a way which basically secures data privacy. And I think this whole topic we cannot solve in this video right now. I think we can only start with the basics today. But we will also in the next videos continue with exactly that topic, talk more about what do you need to do to basically implemented the right way? What are the options to make it completely secure in terms of data privacy, but still try to get most out of the data? And both is a really tough trade-off, to be quite fair, because there's not this super cool solution no one knows about where you say, yeah, I set up the perfect solution which is securing like data privacy on all sides, and I get all of the information. That's not possible anymore. So you need to decide whether to stay a little bit, you fully agree to all the data privacy rules, and then you have less data or less options in terms of data analysis, or you try to still use gray zones which are still out on the market. And this is
On the more
up for
technical side, maybe to start wrapping up, we talked about the parallel tracking and we talked about the migration plan. When would you recommend to tell a team, okay, like now is a good time to make the switch?
You said it. Now is a good time to maybe not to switch.
No,
now
yeah,
is a good
exactly,
time
to
to
start,
start.
the parallel tracking. Yes,
Yeah,
but you start the parallel tracking, and then when do you say like, okay, we had it in parallel for some time. When do you say we have enough? Let's go.
As soon as possible, because you don't know how many issues you have to solve.
After data checking and so on for GA4,
Exactly.
and when you see it's, so you will not get the same data for GA4 as for Universal Analytics, just to say it right at the
Cannot
beginning.
compare it.
You
Exactly.
cannot compare it. But if you see, okay, it is in a good window in terms of correctness, then you should start with GA4 and check all of your data you are analyzing in GA4 and in Universal Analytics, and try to also do it then in GA4.
And
So
what
how
about-
are we normally do transitions like that, right? We basically set up a migration or completely start all over with a new property of GA4. We implement the tracker or the tracking code, client side, server side, doesn't matter at that point. And when all of the events the customer wants is inside GA4, we do the first basically QA checkups with them. Yeah, we take a certain time frame. We say, okay, we have certain KPIs we would like to check. We pull the data from Universal Analytics. We pull the data from GA4. As Alex said, they will not be exactly the same. Cannot be, because both tracking concepts are different. But of course, they need to make sense. When you are at that point where you say, okay, the data is quite good and all of the events I need are inside, then you should also move to GA4 and get used to it. And at the beginning, you still have the option to compare to Universal Analytics if you have questions, even if the data is slightly different. But you have the options. If you make the move too late to the new system, and after 1 or 2 months, Universal Analytics is stopping, and you're not fully into GA4, you have an issue, right?
So if you need to start working on the process, send us an email.
Very
Exactly.
good.
So you can contact us for that, or you can also contact us to be up to date with the latest news.
Ricardo, our lead generation manager.
On not just Google Analytics, but also Data Studio and BigQuery, and the best way to do that, Alex?
Yes, so follow our Medium channel. We have, as we said, so on this 14th of March, where the big announcement was, we also published a blog post about it, so we can also link it then into the description. So we summarized a little bit, also talked about the differences, what you have to do now, how we maybe can support, and so on. Yeah, so and then LinkedIn, we also made their blog post about it. Yeah, and we will also do some more YouTube videos about that topic in the future. So stay tuned and check it out.
What about in your email inbox?
You have also the newsletter. I need 1 or 2 more times than I always.
Then it's
in my mind, always.
Then it's added to the pitch. Basically.
So we have this newsletter every week, every Friday, most of the time. Yeah, so we will have some cool new data analytics and so on from different posts and social media. You can also check it out. Yeah.
Perfect. And then for that, Thomas, Alex, thanks for watching.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.